It is a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your interest in the topic because you're people that care about your kids, and I appreciate that. One of the things I've noticed, it's occurred to me lately, I've been doing this series a long time. This is maybe about the 50th time or so I presented this series. But one thing I've noticed, some of the people that are most interested in good parenting are good parents. Sometimes a congregation will ask me to come, and I'll get there, and they'll say, the people that needed to hear it wouldn't show up. But other times I'll go, and there's just, like I was at Broadmoor in Nashville just a few weeks ago. Had been there about a dozen years before doing the same series, and was back again doing it. It was just amazing just seeing those kids and everything. And I enjoyed at the beginning this morning, this evening, just seeing your children here. And I hear good things about this work. And so I just want to commend you in that. And if this weekend we can help encourage parents to keep doing the good things they're doing and maybe hone some skills here or there, well, our time will have been well spent. One other thing I will mention, if anybody is wondering where the middle-aged brown-haired guy is that was in the picture that was selected is from about 15 or 20 years ago. So that's me from many years back. All right. My name is Scott. My wife and I, for those you don't know, we raised 6 kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. We've had kids in the house from 1984 until this month. This month, my youngest turned 18, so he's not technically a kid anymore. But we've been raising kids for a long time. But first time I ever taught on this topic, I was single and asked to teach on it, and I rode my motorcycle over there and taught on it. And some of the things that I said then are things that we'll be talking about now, because the book of Proverbs hasn't changed, and it works. There's good stuff in there. We'll also look at some other verses from other texts as well. Tonight we're going to talk about the home and the parents, and then tomorrow morning we'll get into specifically about the parent, the actual dealing with the children and stuff. I want to start with this question. What kind of homes do our children need? So I don't know if there's anybody here that is about to get married or about to purchase your first home. Maybe you're expecting your first child and you're in the process of home buying. And I want you to imagine you're doing that. And one of you guys, something just came on the market. And so you tell your wife, hey, this just came on the market. Looks like it might be a good deal. And so you go over there and you meet the realtor, and there it is. Now, the mom here, with baby on the way, she's saying, that's not going to do. I don't know what you're thinking, but I can't bring my baby into the world in that. That's just totally unacceptable. And we got some basics. How the baby needs to have his own room, and we need this, we need that. And I'd really like the hardwood floors. Granite countertops would be nice, but this, out of the question. And then the realtor says, well, something else came up over in the historic part of town, and it just came online as well. And you say, okay, yeah. If they've redone the bathroom and the kitchen, that could be really, really nice. I like the lines. It's got some character to it. And I'll ask a few questions since we're not the full assembly. I'll ask a few questions while we're talking. Who recognizes the first house? Anybody? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. Now, it's either the cabin he was born in or the cabin next door. They're not quite sure, but it's been preserved. If that's not the one he was born in, it would have looked pretty much just the same. What's my point? My point is that a home is more important than a house. How many of you know adults? Could be somebody in this room. Could be your cousin, your sister, your coworker, your best friend. How many of you know adults who in their 30s and 40s have serious emotional baggage and just difficulty coping because of the home they were brought up in? If you know somebody like that, raise your hand. How many of you know somebody that in their 30s and 40s, they just have difficulty coping in life because they were brought up in a house where the washing machine was avocado green and the dryer was white and the carpet was out of style and the kitchen had not been remodeled? Surely y'all all know people that are just traumatized, and nobody's traumatized from that. You know, we enjoy when we can redo a kitchen, redo a bathroom, get some new appliances, but that is not what children need. And sometimes we spend so much of our focus on making money and away from the family so that we can get things for the kids when it's not really for the kids, because that's not the main thing that they need. The crying need in our culture is not better houses, it's better homes. Down around Washington, D.C., they were building several years ago these McMansions, and they were just huge, huge, fantastic houses. But as I described them, somebody familiar with them said, that's right, that's what it is. Nobody home. And the kids would come home and there'd be nobody there. By the way, statistics have shown that a lot of teenage pregnancies are conceived between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. Because just nobody home, no guidance, no direction, et cetera, et cetera. Proverbs chapter 15, let's read 2 Proverbs here. If I can have one brother read Proverbs 17:1 and another read Proverbs 15, verse 16 and 17, nice and loud. Who's got Proverbs 17, verse 1?
Better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a feast. I had a feast tonight for supper. It's nice when you can have both, but don't ever put the physical above the family and the loving and the spiritual, which is really important. The other text there, 15, 16, and 17.
Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fattened ox with hatred with it.
Yeah. Again, if you can have some steak along with your vegetables, enjoy it. But children that sit down with a family that loves them and it's just vegetables on the table, those children are blessed. But strife and a lack of love, it doesn't matter how much money's been spent on the food. It's not what it needs to be. Here's some things children need. They need, as Titus says, look at Titus chapter 2. Notice this in verse 1. As for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine. I don't want to spend much time on this, but we misuse the phrase sound doctrine a lot, I think. What do we usually think of when we think sound doctrine? A sound doctrine is about our theology and what we do while we're at church, right? Well, that should be, sound doctrine just means healthy teaching. We should have healthy teaching about our theology, and we should have healthy teaching about what we do in the worship of the church. But you know what? You put your finger down just about anywhere in the teachings of Jesus, and how much of the time is he talking about what we do on Sunday as a church, and how much of the time is he talking about how we live every day in our lives? In Matthew 18, he says, bring it before the church, and he says, do this in remembrance of me. But most of Scripture is not about what we do corporately. It's about how we live ourselves. And this is sound doctrine. Here's sound doctrine. Older men, be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, and in patience. Older women, Likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teacher of good things, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers. One translation has busy at home, another workers at home. We're going to see later that that doesn't mean a woman can't do anything that brings income into the house, because the worthy woman, who is very home-centered, also was making garments and sending them out to the tradesmen and selling them, and that was bringing income to the house. But just notice this domestic focus here. Love their husbands, love their children, be discreet, pure, chaste, workers at home, good, obedient to their husband, that the word of God be not blasphemed. They need time. Fathers are told in Deuteronomy 6, what? Teach your children. When you rise up, when you lie down, when you're walking in the way. We're going to talk later about the tendency of sometimes just putting teaching off on the Bible classes at church. And that's not going to do it. And I'll give a quick example. If anybody here is a nurse or a doctor and I come into the hospital with my child and my child is terribly malnourished and you have to try to revive the child and help the child and say, what's been going on? And as you ask questions, you find out, you realize the child is just starving to death. And I say, well, we fed him Sunday dinner and a Wednesday night snack every week. Can you see what the problem is? That's not enough for a child. Sunday dinner and Wednesday night snack is not going to be what that child needs. Just taking a child to a Bible class, that's not what that child needs. It can add to it. It can be beneficial. Do that. Take advantage of those opportunities. But in Deuteronomy 6, the fathers of Israel, teach these things to your children just regularly and train them up. Lots of verses about that we'll talk more later about Proverbs and training, and a household that's dedicated to doing what? What did Joshua say about his house? You can do what you want to do, but what? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that starts with the husband and the wife. Genesis 2:24. After woman is created, for this cause, a man, this is so simple. But we live in a world right now that is attacking almost everything good and fundamental in this relationship. So, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother. What brings a child into a world? A father and a mother. It's not a mother and a mother. It's not a father and a father. A father and a mother. He leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And what does Jesus comment about that when he's asked about divorce? He says, what God joined together, let no man put asunder. And Hebrews 13 says, let marriage be had in honor among all, and let the bed be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. And the house should be built on the word of God. The house at the end of Matthew 7 isn't talking about your family so much, it's just talking about your life. You remember the wise man and the foolish man? But let's apply that to our homes as well. A foolish man hears what Jesus says and doesn't do it. And Jesus said, that's like a man that built his house on the sand. Rain's going to come, destroy that house. Flood's going to break it down. The wise man builds his house on the rock. And Jesus said, that's the man that hears what I say and does it. And Jesus doesn't say rain won't fall on that house. He doesn't say floods won't come against that house. The rains come and the floods come, but that house stands. Why? Because it was built on the rock. He listening to what Jesus said and doing it. And then, of course, again, Joshua 24:15, dedicated to serving God. Homes like houses need work and maintenance. Here's a question for dads. All right, dads, suppose you're at home tomorrow and one of the kids notices, or you notice you're down in the basement or something, and something falls down, and you look up and you see that, except for the word Terminex. You just see those little guys eating away at your house. Ponder that for a minute. How seriously are you going to take that, dads? Is anybody here going to say, I think it's just a phase? It'll probably get better. Lots of people have termites. Is anybody going to say any of those things? No. This is going to become a major priority right away. You're going to do something immediately. You might start with, calling these guys there on the thing. You're going to do something about that, and you should. You absolutely should. Why? Your house is at stake. Your equity is at stake. That's not going to get better. That's going to get worse. And the longer you don't deal with it, more destruction is being done. Do you need to protect your equity? You need to take care of it? Yes, you do. So every dad here that said, yeah, I'm going to do something about that quick, good. Now I have a second question. Are you letting something worse into your house than termites? Every year since about 2007, I work with a lot of young men during the summer. I started working when Sewell Hall was doing his leadership camp. I started working with that, and then when it got too big, and Joe Works started Soul Camp, and Gary Fisher started his Indiana camp, and I've worked in those camps, and so I deal with a lot of young men every year. And these are young men, usually age 14 to 18. Sometimes in some of the camps they're on up into their 20s and such, who take a week out of their summer to go, and you get up, you eat breakfast, and you have a Bible class, and then another Bible class, and another Bible class. You go get lunch, and then there's more Bible classes in the afternoon. You get maybe a couple hours free time in the afternoon to rec time, and maybe 45 minutes later, but then it's back to Bible classes. And some of them you get to pick one time where you can have a break, get bunk time or something. But for a lot of the day, from say 8 in the morning till 11 at night, these guys are studying the Bible and doing devos and singing and listening to lessons and stuff. And they give up their phone for the whole week. And they give up a week of their summer to come do that, and they love it. And so like Sewell's, it started off in the 40s, and it got to be like about 140. It was too big for the camp. Now Gary's is like 150 or so. One of our biggest problems? These otherwise really good young men, a high percentage of them are addicted to pornography. Like one 13-year-old told me, he said, my dad gave me this smartphone for my birthday. And he said, I wish he had never given it to me. So many of these young men, and I've talked to guys, I won't get but like every day, one fella said, I've had this problem. The only day during the year that I don't have this problem is the 1 week at camp. There's other problems too. One of the boys just a couple months ago died of a drug overdose. But the pornography is usually the big one. And I've had to deal with again this past week. I have to deal with women coming to me because they've caught their husband, they've found his pornography stash and stuff. Sometimes women drop off their husband, here, you deal with him, and different things. Let's come back to our termite question. If you are putting electronics in the hands of a child that is not mature enough to handle it, especially if it's a male, but more and more females also, you are by far probability creating a situation that is going to get them addicted to pornography. And frankly, I'm tired of dealing with it. I had to deal with it with a fella who, I had to deal with him when his wife caught him calling all these numbers. I had to deal with it when one of the kids found him dressed in women's undergarments. I had to deal with it when he was going to leave the family and go out to California because he had to see where this was going to go. He ended up in a psychiatric ward. He died not many years after that. He had finally repented, but one of the last things he did before he died was he told a young man, do not waste your life on pornography like I did. Now, let's go back to the termites. Every single dad in here knows that if you found out termites were getting into your home, you would stop that immediately, right? If you have a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, those ages, they're already getting exposed to it. Years ago, I'm talking 15, 20 years ago, the average age of introduction to internet porn was 11. And that was years ago. And they're not always looking for something bad. You know what happens sometimes? What do you do when you don't know what something is? Used to we had, dictionaries and encyclopedias, right? But what do we do now when we don't know what something is, adults? We Google it. Guess what kids do when they hear something at school and they don't know what it is? They Google it. Can you see where that leads? And if you're looking for a Maytag dryer or a kayak or a mountain bike, if you spend 20 minutes shopping, what do you start noticing happens to your news feed and your social media feed? Or you're looking for a Honda or a Toyota or whatever, all of a sudden you're getting all these ads about that. The pornography industry makes more than the NFL and the NBA combined. They know how to target young people. Take this seriously, dads. One, make sure that you're being clean, but understand how destructive this can be. A person close to me, her husband ended up in prison over this stuff. Because the more they get into it, then they need something more, and something more, and something more, and something more. And he got to where it needed to be violent, and he ended up in prison. Take it really, really serious. Proverbs chapter 5, 6, and 7, we don't have time to read it, but if you haven't read this lately, read those, especially 5 and 7. 6 has several other things going on in it. It's just the warning against adultery at the end. But Proverbs 5 is fantastic, warning against a strange woman. And then Proverbs 7 is watching the foolish young man follow the adulterous woman down to her house. It's a path of death. Many are her slain. He doesn't realizing like he's going like an ox to the slaughter. But in Proverbs 5, keep your way far from her. Young man, keep your way far from her. Dads, don't put the avenue of the virtual prostitute in your child's hands. Now, there will come a time when you can know this young man is mature enough to handle this. Is there a time when we start letting a young man drive? Learn how to, shoot a gun? Different things like that? But we analyze what? We analyze the maturity and we supervise it. I used to listen to young men talking about how they got started over and over and over and over and over and over. It was always either nobody was home or I was alone in my room. Does a 13-year-old need a TV or a computer in his room? Considering what's out there? A huge percentage of all computer downloads are for pornography. Take it really serious. Watch your children, know your children, and when they're mature enough, let them handle a number of things that they're going to do in life. But don't throw something a lot worse than termites into the soul of your children. That sometimes it's devastating, sometimes it ends in death, sometimes it ends in prison, sometimes all sorts of things. Take it serious. Let's talk quickly about husbands and wives. Some husbands, leave and cleave. So if you're here and you're planning to get married, guys, leave and cleave. I mean, nice to be around the parents and share some things, but it's time for you to be the head of your family when you do that. You know, don't expect dad to change your oil and mom to do your laundry. You know, just new family, grown-up time, leave and cleave. And you need to provide for physical needs. It's interesting in the curses in the garden. The curses on Eve revolved around what? Domestically, it revolved around her husband and the birth of her children. What did the curses around Adam fall upon? Providing, bringing in the food, and working hard and sweating and dying. Provide spiritual leadership, like in Deuteronomy 6 and Ephesians 6:4, where fathers are instructed about bringing up their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Provide leadership generally and be a sacrificial and serving leader. Look at this. Husbands, love your wives how? As Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, sacrificed for her. So a husband's love should be a sacrificial leadership. It's a leadership. Ephesians 5 doesn't tell the husband, you know, you rule the wife. Ephesians 5 tells the wife, you submit to the husband. But if the woman is to submit to the husband needs to be a leader. But you can have two kind of leaders, and you know, you can see this through history, right? You know, here's one king, and he's king, and so what does that mean? Like Rehoboam, you know, the people said, you know, give us a break. And the older advisor said, if you'll serve them, they'll serve you. What's Rehoboam say? Oh no, you know, I'm gonna beat you he beat you with whips, I'm gonna beat you with scorpions. Well, it didn't work out real well, everybody left him, or a lot of them did. There's that kind of king that wants to see how many layers of gold he can get on his, you know, carriage or whatever. And then there's the kind of king that does what? He thinks about what's good for his people. There's some husbands that they think about, I get what I want. You know, this is what we're going to have for supper. This is what time it's going to be ready. This is where we're going on vacation, because I'm the dad. But a more sacrificial view would be what? What does my wife need? What do my children need? And what does this text tell us to do? Yeah, you're the head of the house, like Jesus was the head of the church. But being head of the church, what did Jesus do for it? He sacrificed himself for it. It's a sacrificial leadership. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. We'll talk about this again in a few minutes. And so he's to love her and she is to respect him. Husband is directed, love her and sacrifice for her, and she is directed, submit to and respect him. Husbands, remember your vows. Remember those things we said, love and cherish? Have we always done a good job of that? I know I haven't always done a good job of cherishing. When I get impatient, when I get grouchy, when I'm thinking about what's weighing on me and said, that's not cherishing. What did we agree to do? And those weren't just pretty words. We were agreeing to do that. We asked, her dad for her hand in marriage, and we stood there before God and we said this. So when we've done poorly at this, it's time for us to step up and do better. We're told to honor the woman, and to keep yourself to her and her alone. What did Job say in Job 31? I made a covenant with my eyes not to look upon a maiden. Keep your way far from the strange woman. Matthew chapter 5, somebody that's looking at a woman to lust after has committed adultery already in his heart. You shall not commit adultery. And Matthew 5, adultery in the heart is what's going on with pornography. And really, it is virtual prostitutes. There are prostitutes in St. Louis who, for money, will make themselves available, and they have to actually touch the people and come in contact with the people. The virtual prostitutes, they can get more money, and they don't even have to touch the guys. They don't have to know them. They don't have to care anything about them. Just take their money. Marriage. Respect that bond. Respect boundaries in how you dress, in how you communicate. Watch out for making compliments that you don't need to be making. Watch out for contact that shouldn't be there. Watch out for companionship that shouldn't be there. Closeness, imagination, intimacy, love, desire, loyalty. Have you ever had friend, coworker, brother-in-law, whoever, that got in an affair and you talk to them about it? Have you ever heard this line? It just happened. Ever heard that? It doesn't just happen. Things precede it. Often flirtation precedes it. I knew one girl, on Facebook, she lists herself as single. There's nothing, I'm just flirting. No, it's horrible. Things precede it. And sometimes the things that precede it is just not respecting boundaries. Putting yourself in a situation where you're alone not with your spouse, but with somebody else's spouse, and they're alone with you. Why be in that situation? That respect boundaries. You know what? When I mow my grass, I mow my grass. And when I plant a garden, I don't go start digging in the neighbor's yard because I realize that's his. And when he comes home, I'm not sitting on the couch because that's not my house. Respect boundaries, respect other people's marriage, respect your marriage, and honor it. We live in a society where we have disposable marriage now. We're in a disposable culture. I like to throw stuff away. I like, some of you might like cloth diapers, and that's fine. I didn't. I'm a big fan of disposable diapers. I want to get that out of there. I don't mind disposable plates, all sorts of things. But we act like marriage is disposable. I think God wants me to be happy. I thought things would be different. I want to do what I want to do. It's not good for the kids to see us unhappy. You're right, so start acting better and be happier. I'm not in love anymore. Well, then get busy and get back in love. What did it say in Titus 2? Older women train the younger women to love their husbands. In the lesson for young people, we'll talk more about this, how to love. And of course, the permanence of marriage that we've already mentioned. Here's a lesson from Cuban cars. From about 1960, for about 50 years before the embargo ended, and a lot of you guys will know this, what kind of cars did they drive in Cuba? If you guys know what I'm talking about. You couldn't buy a new car and you couldn't get parts. And so, you could go down to Cuba and you can still see some of these down there now. And these are what are on the road. Well, guess what? 60 years ago, right here in Ellisville, these used to be driving around. But they're not anymore. Why? Mark, what was your first car? 1987 I like Ford Rangers. How happy were you to get that 1987 Ford Ranger?
Very happy.
Yeah. Where is it today?
It's probably in a junkyard
Yeah, yeah. Because as excited as you were when you got it, after a little while, started having some trouble with it. You know, some things weren't working too well, and then there was something shinier, and you let somebody else have it, and after being used, it's probably in a junkyard. Mine was a 68 T-Bird, and I'm sure it's been in a junkyard for many, many, many years. These guys in Cuba knew they couldn't do that. That's a pretty good looking Edsel right there. Do you suppose that never overheated? Is it still on the road because it never gave him any trouble? Because it never broke down? Of course it broke down. Of course things quit working. Of course it overheated. And what did he do? He took care of it because he realized you just don't walk out and get another one. There's a lesson for us to learn from that. Let marriage be had in honor among all. But a healthy marriage involves much more than don't commit adultery. Just like a healthy body involves much more than don't commit suicide. Both of these are good rules, but these are like below bare minimums. You know, it's not, well, you haven't committed suicide, you're very healthy. No, not necessarily. In life, there is stress and strain. There are rains, there are floods, there are transmissions that go out and flat tires that come and you know, radiators that overheat. And it would be nice, husbands and wives, if every day was a beautiful sunny day and every night was a romantic moonlit night and there was just no problems that day. I like those days. You do too. Not all days are like that. Some days are cloudy and some days are stormy. And when things get difficult and we get annoyed with each other, we stop looking at, that's my flesh. That's my better half. That's the other part of me. We start looking at her as that woman over there that's annoying me. And you start looking at him, that stupid guy that I married, and that annoying, and you're not looking at it as a team. Now we're just annoyed. Do we ever get annoyed? Yeah. Are we ever annoying? Yeah. And if we start looking at it that way, we get farther and farther apart. And when I'm doing this, whose interest am I focused on? When I'm annoyed with my wife, that woman over there, whose interest am I thinking about? I'm thinking about mine. How much am I thinking about hers? I'm not thinking about her interest and what's good for her. I'm thinking about her annoying behavior, you know, and her, you know, frustrating ways she did things. That's what I'm thinking about, and how that inconvenienced me or I don't like it. Well, guess what she's thinking about? She's thinking about what she wants and her way and her point of view. Is she thinking about his point of view and what's good for him? No, she's focused on how he's in her way and frustrating her and annoying her. And how much is going to get solved like that? As long as we're both being selfish, things just are south. Look at Philippians chapter 2. This is one of my favorite passages on marriage, and it's not about marriage. It's talking about how Christians should treat each other. But if you'll apply this rule in marriage, it'll go a long, long way. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Now look at verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interest of others. And it says, have this mind in you which was in Christ. Because he considered not being under the equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself and lowered himself to take on a lower form and even be put to death in the humiliating and miserable death of a cross. So, if he will stop thinking about his interests and he will count her better than him, is that going to help her? Ladies, would you appreciate it if when times are tough, if your husband will just stop and decide to put your interests above his own and stop thinking about his interests and start thinking about your interest and do nothing through conceit or selfishness? Would you like that if he would do that? Yeah. How about the other way around? Guys, if when you're having trouble, would you like it if your wife, instead of nagging and keep complaining everything, would all of a sudden stop and think about your point of view and think, I want to do what's good for him. I want to put his interests first. Instead of just focusing, would you appreciate that? Yeah. So guess what we can do when we're having trouble? We can obey God. And when both parties who have pledged to be there for better or for worse, when things got a little bit worse, they can make it back better by stop being selfish about that girl or that guy and come back to being one, and each one looking to the interest of the other one. And that's a beautiful thing. If there's financial argument, will that solve the financial argument? Think of a bunch of other type of arguments. Would that solve a bunch of other arguments as well? When you both stop being selfish, when we both stop that, and we both think about putting the other person first, how many arguments is that going to fix? That's going to fix tons of things. And then also enjoy those sunny days and those moonlit nights. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. I want to ask a question. You don't answer this, but just think about it. Wives, if you were asked, are you submissive to your husband? Might you say, oh, a lot of the time. And if somebody says, what do you mean a lot of the time? Well, like, when he agrees with what I said we ought to do, when he does it the way I wanted to do it anyway, when he listened to my view on it and did it that way, I submit then. And that's not submission. Have you ever been driving down the road and there was a car in front of you or behind you? Maybe it's behind you. And when you turned right, it turned right. When you got on the interstate, it got on the interstate. When you took the ramp, it took the ramp. When you took a left, it took a left, and you started wondering, was it following you? But then when you got to Main Street and you went north and it went south, you realized what? It wasn't following you. You were just coincidentally going the same way for a little while. If your submission amounts to, oh yeah, I submit when he's going the way that I'm wanting to go anyway, and as soon as he wants to go another way, I'm going my way, that's not really submission. Husbands have a sacrificial, not a selfish leadership, a sacrificial leadership. Wives respect that leadership. And old ones train the younger ones to love their husbands, love their children, be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being in subject to their own husbands. Proverbs 31, the worthy woman, she's an excellent wife. Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her. She does him good and not evil. She stretches out her hands to the needy. She looks well to the ways of her household. Strength and dignity are her clothing. The law of kindness is on her tongue. And physically, I'm not going to get graphic here, but I just want you to think about the physical responsibility. It's said in 1 Corinthians 7, do not defraud each other. There are marriages where one or the other defrauds the other. One of the people in the marriage, and maybe it's a man, maybe it's a woman, they've just decided they're not interested in being with the other person anymore. That's a horrible thing to do to a person. You got married, you were excited to be married and in love, and you said, do you take this woman to heaven to hold? Do you take this man to heaven to hold? Keep yourself to him and him alone, her and her alone, and they both said, I do, and then they kissed, and then 7 years later, one goes, I'm done. That's not what you promised to do. Now, this gets back to, well, I'm not in love anymore. We can talk more about that on Sunday. But rekindle the fire in your marriage, and there's some biblical principles that are not just about the physical relationship of marriage, but they work really well in it. Just like there's biblical principles that are not just about customer service, but they work really, really well in it, right? So how about this? Be considerate. Matthew 7, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Is that going to help in the romantic relationship of a husband and wife? If somebody's sick and got a headache and the other person is considerate, is that the right thing to do? Absolutely. Being considerate is always a good thing to do. Just be considerate. Philippians 2, not looking just to your own things, but also to the things of others. Is that going to make a difference in a relationship? Yes, it is. Don't be selfish in this relationship. Secure. The husband of the worthy woman, what did it say? The heart of her husband trusts in her. How opposite the husband of that Proverbs 7 woman. Remember? The one who was on a journey, took a bag of money, and now she's out prowling the street. She's not trustworthy. The worthy woman, heart of her husband trusts in her. And impassioned. What's it say in Proverbs 5? Be intoxicated in her love. You know, don't go after the bosom of a strange woman. Look to your own wife. Be intoxicated in her love. And Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives. Titus 2:5, young women trained to love their husbands. Just these general, unselfish, giving principles. They work in all sorts of places in life. And of course, they work well in the physical relationship. Communication is where we'll finish up tonight. Communication is really important. We're to speak the truth in love. Soft tongue breaks the bone. Soft answer turns away wrath. Proverbs 15:1, grievous words stir up anger. Have we ever seen that happen in our own homes? It's like, you know, maybe the boss, maybe the foreman is in a bad mood because he got chewed out by the boss. So he chewed out dad. So dad comes home and he's in a bad mood, and he comes in barking at the wife and just treating her badly. And then she's all upset, and then the kids are making too much noise, and then she's snapping at the kids, and then they start grouching at each other, and it works their way down to the toddler, and the toddler kicks the cat. You know, grievous words stir up anger. And have you ever noticed this? And dads, we can do this too, but I think it's particularly here about moms. Moms, does it ever get frustrating? You know, you've asked the boys to put away their clothes. You've asked your husband to put away his clothes. You know, you've done this. There's that stupid dog that somebody, you know, wanted to make sure the family got, and it just made another mess. And you were getting ready for church, and the baby just threw up all over your dress. And it's late, and there's still socks all over the stairs. It's just like, and when you get that voice, I don't know why everybody thinks I haven't been ready. Why can nobody pick up their socks? I'm so sick and tired of this. Do you think I'm When we get real tense and frustrated and irritable, what happens to our effectiveness? We get more and more effective, right? Oh, that's not the way it works? Yeah, no, it doesn't. The more tense and frustrated we get, husbands, us too, how effective are we? Dads, if you're dealing with one of the kids and they've done something stupid and you got to take time to correct them and teach them a lesson and punish them, and because if they did something that deserved punishment, when you take time and you do it with love and patience, but firmly, and they know it's because you love them and you want them to grow up to be a good man and learn this lesson, how does it go? It goes really well. when you're just annoyed and you start snapping at them and bark, how does that go? Yeah, kids can tell, can't they? They can tell when we're acting out of love, and they can tell when we're acting out of annoyance. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. And then there's those verses in Proverbs about better to live in the desert or in the corner of the rooftop than with that, continual dripping of nagging and thing. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth, but such as is good and edifying for the case as the need may be, that it may give grace to them that hear. So don't throw jabs. My mistake. I should have learned by now not to expect too much. I shouldn't blame you. You get it honestly enough from your dad or mom or brother or sister. I should have listened to my mother when she warned me about you. There's one who speaks rashly like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. After we've been married a little bit, do we know where the sore spots are? Do we know the buttons to push if we want to? Yeah. Don't push those buttons. Do what's helpful. There's one more thing I want to cover, but we're out of time, so I'm going to save it for tomorrow morning, and we'll do it right before we start in on early child training. And that's going to be about apologies. The importance of making them, the importance of our children seeing us make them, and the difference between a really lame apology and a really good apology. But that's going to take about 5 minutes or so, and our time's up. So we'll start with that in the morning. Thank you.